bows. All of them. Hey YouTube, Bros Before Bows, we're back again. It's a beautiful spring day here. Wind is blowing a little bit, so I apologize if the sound is a little muffled or noisy. But it's a perfect day to be out here testing some arrows. On a windy day, I'm testing some micro diameter, high FOC arrows. We're getting ready to do an arrow video, and just wanted to kind of preface what we're planning to do. So it's probably going to be a 2 or 3 part series. There's a ton of material, a ton of information to cover with arrows. Arrows are super important. I know we spend a lot of time talking about bows. We get really excited about bows, and then I think a lot of us skip over arrows. And I think it's important to go over and really understand why arrows are important and how they can make a difference in your success as a hunter. And there's a ton of arrows out there. There's different types of arrows, standard diameter, micro diameter, and everything in between. And it's hard to know what's best. A lot of it's preference and what you plan to do with that arrow. So the arrow is what comes in contact with the animal. So, in my opinion, I believe that gives the arrow a little bit more importance than even the bow. Obviously, the bow is important. It's what drives the arrow. They basically have to work together to achieve that goal. But it's easily overlooked, and it can get very expensive too. So there's a lot of things to take into consideration, and what it comes down to, and why it's so important, and this is my opinion. We don't hunt in a controlled environment. Obviously, I mean, the wind is blowing really hard right now. You know, you might think you have a perfect shot when you let the arrow go, but there's, you know, depending on how far that arrow has to fly, there's a lot of things that can happen between when you let it go and when it gets to the animal. So even if you have the perfect release, the perfect sight picture, and you judge the distance 100% accurate, there are things that you cannot control. So besides, you know, there are things that you can control as well. So that's where we come to our equipment, and that's why I think it's really important to spend some time not only with the bow, but especially with the arrow. We've been testing arrows. I've spent way too much money on arrows this past winter, and you know, we could do an arrow build video that just shows you what we're going to use and build it that way. But I think it's useful to talk about different types of arrows, different brands, and most importantly, the concepts that are important to building arrows. Kenneth's going to talk a little bit about that, and I'll just go ahead and turn the video over to him and let him explain how this is going to go for us. All right, so back in the backyard again, just taking some shots and kind of brainstorming over some of the topics we're going to cover in our up and coming arrow build series. I can guarantee it's going to be at least 3 videos, maybe 2, I don't know, maybe 4. But there's a lot of content to cover. There's a lot of issues to cover. There's a lot of information to talk about when you go to put together an arrow. A lot of it depends on what you plan on doing with that arrow. Both Josh and I, we do all of our stuff, all of the things that we do is geared towards
big game hunting, more specific elk hunting. Seemed like a year ago there was a lot of talk about FOC and a lot of talk about Ed Ashby's studies and the information that he put out, the data points that he put out on penetration and things like that. And over the past 6 months, I've seen a lot of big names, big respected names in the archery industry and the hunting industry come out and kind of pretty much blow off FOC. The funny part about that is that when you dig into what they recommend as far as like hunting arrows or hunting setups, they all tend to be on the higher end of FOC. It's funny. But they say, oh, I never measure it, I don't care. But they talk about putting 75 to 150 grains up front in the front of the arrow. However, the number one important thing, like we've said before, is achieving perfect arrow flight. And that's on Dr. Ashby's list of important things. And he says in that list, it's prioritized as it is organized. So number one on that on his list for an arrow build is achieving perfect arrow flight. So we're going to talk a lot about, we're going to get into a lot into depth. So second on that list is arrow integrity. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of the things that we do to try and improve our arrow structural integrity. So the next part of that was FOC, front of center. What is the magic number? Doesn't matter how heavy your arrow is if you can't get it to fly straight out of your bow. It doesn't matter how fast your arrow is if you can't get it to fly straight out of your bow.